This is your host, Swapnil Bhartia, and welcome to TFI Let's Talk, a special edition for KubeCon. And today we have with us Brooke Frischmeyer, Senior Director of Product Management of 5G and Edge at Robin.io. Brooke, it's great to have you on the show.
Thank you for having me.
Let's talk about 5G. I want to, before we talk about Open RAN and open source, I just want to understand a bit about the evolution that is going on in 5G. And if you remember last year, the US government, they released some spectrum, which further democratized broadband or 5G. So if you can just quickly give us, kind of what kind of evolution or progress or development you have seen in the 5G space in the last 12 months or so?
Well, I'd say, a lot of people are actually starting to do it, which is the big thing. A lot of people or companies have been waiting to see if someone can actually pull it off, especially with Open RAN. Fortunately, we are a part of one of those networks, which I'm sure I'll bring up a couple times today. But I think that's the big piece. And people are getting the automation down, they're getting the integration down, and they're focusing on lifecycle management. So I think it's really in the deployment phase right now, which is the big new news.
When we talk about 5G, most of the people, they talk about iPhones and all those things, but we are also talking about building private networks. So how is 5G enabling that as well?
So it's also enabling private 5G. I have to say, until about a few years ago, or let's say 2 years ago, I didn't really know what we were going to do with private 5G, but we're part of a number of coalitions now. And to me, it seems like the most interesting part because it's going to enable a lot of things in rural. One of the ones I find fascinating is smart agriculture. When you look at all the different things you can deploy to even monitor things like insects. I mean, it's just amazing. And then the next big one, I think we'll see a lot of wealthy nations starting to deploy private 5G in terms of smart cities. And that has absolutely huge deployment options. But I think that'll be very, very interesting. So I feel like the use cases are developing better. And now that a lot of the underlying infrastructure, both hardware and software, is coming up to play, as we mentioned earlier, we can see people moving into private 5G more and more.
One thing that is also unique about 5G versus, it's funny to use the word legacy or traditional network, is now we are using all open source technology, whether it's hardware or software. In the old days, it was used to be black boxes. Now we are using commodity, hardware as well. What role is open source playing in further democratization or, use of 5G technologies?
So when I think of open source, I think of also other open frameworks. And it really helps to spark innovation, and it helps up and coming companies like ourselves as much, because when you get in one of these big monolithic, where a single vendor just lays down the physical infrastructure, the cloud platform, the automation, it really doesn't leave a lot of room for a lot of innovations, especially on the automation side and the cloud platform side. So all of the open source leads to disaggregation of hardware and software, and it promotes a lot of more open architectures where a number of people can play. And that absolutely positively sparks innovation and leads to a more vibrant infrastructure from any company to choose from.
And as you earlier alluded to Open RAN, can you talk about what are the open source technologies that you feel are going to drive this growth and revolution in the 5G space, and also the technology where Robin is playing a role?
So absolutely, positively Kubernetes. That's been around for quite some time, and our platforms are cloud platforms built off of Kubernetes. One of the things that Kubernetes has really offered as we move to a lot of these is, it has its own API. And when we look at some standards that aren't ready yet, people are centering certain things around the Kubernetes API. So it's really put itself as a focal point or a way to bring a lot of different things together, and it was a big help. The other big ones are TIP Open RAN. Absolutely critical. There are still things being developed, but more and more in RFPs, RFIs, we see people asking for the roadmaps to be fully Open RAN compliant, because again, this is going to allow that disaggregated software community to come together to put together solutions. And the other big one I would have to say is ETSI MEC. One of the big evolutions or promises we'll see of a disaggregating of services will be edge computing. And, MEC outlines, a beautiful framework for that. And, it also provides a conduit back into Open RAN so we can have applications that feed back into the network and vice versa. So it opens up a lot of interesting opportunities and, again, ways that people can innovate.
Can you quickly talk about, if you look at these technologies, if you look at the evolution of Robin, Robin has also come a long way. I mean, I've been covering Robin for a very long time, but I see that. So if I ask you, what is the focus of Robin today? What would you say?
All right, so I could talk about this one for at least another hour, but I
you have only 30 seconds.
Yeah, I think the big thing about Robin is, we have great features with great performance. It's about ease of use, ease of integration, ease of onboarding. It's enabling you to get to day one a lot faster than you were in the past. And once you get to day one, a lot of people think about just deploying, but they forget about the lifecycle management. So we like to onboard all of this stuff before you get to day one. So all of the ongoing lifecycle management past deployment becomes easy and crosses multiple domains, from bare metal servers to Kubernetes cluster cloud platform configuration, supporting applications, network functions, network services, switches, and routers. How do we collapse those workflows from multiple domains into single workflows for both greenfield and brownfield applications?
Now, I'll go to the very first point that you're making there about these 5Gs in the deployment phase, and we almost touched upon some of the challenges. So I want to understand that if we do look at this deployment pipelines, 5G is, I mean, in today's world, almost everything is a relatively new technology. Kubernetes, when you talk about, it's a very complicated, so many knobs to turn. And that's where automation plays a very big role. So if I ask you, what are some of the patterns or problems that you see people face when they try to deploy these technologies, and how Robin is helping them with these open source technology that you folks are involved with?
So you mentioned, I believe I heard a twinge in your voice that said Kubernetes was difficult. And I would say generally it probably is. So first of all, it's having the right interface where you don't need to be a Kubernetes expert. You don't need to go and manually configure NUMA nodes. There's no hard coding. There's no searching. It's about onboarding the applications and the network functions, understanding how they fit together. So when you get to the deploy screen, or you get to the scale screen or the clone screen, that you're not talking about Kubernetes configuration, that you're not talking about, okay, which node has the following resources, that everything is modeled for you, that you've already bought in and worked with people like Robin to onboard your models. So now you're just doing things like saying, deploy this application. And before I deploy this application, I need to make sure 3 or 4 other things are already there. And then I want to deploy this size or this flavor, and you click go. And nowhere in there have I talked about searching for resources. Nowhere in there have I talked about Kubernetes config. We have to massively demystify that. And just for one example, it's why so many people struggled with OpenStack. And I was a big proponent of OpenStack, but if you can't make things intuitive without requiring a ridiculous amount of training, then you can't expect your customers to successfully deploy their networks.
Now, we are here at KubeCon. Is there any announcement? What are the things that you folks are doing, showcasing, or talking about at the event?
CNP is our enhanced Kubernetes platform that runs both containers and virtual machines. When it comes to virtual machines, you can run them as the standards-based KubeVirt, which we do, or you can run them better the way we actually do with our original option, which is our own container runtime, because you can pin CPUs more efficiently because we bypass the hypervisor layer. And one of the big things when we talk about RAN, Open RAN, and those applications is that reduces jitter, and we can also get out some more performance. But CNP, when we're talking about that intelligent workload placement with an easy-to-use model that doesn't require you to have expertise, that's CNP. It also has application-aware storage, which is industry-leading, and numerous networking options, including network policies that you won't find in a traditional Kubernetes that wasn't really built for service providers. When it comes to MDCAP, we do what we call metal-to-services orchestration. where in a single workflow, we can go and update your bare metal servers, BIOS, FPGA, configure storage, do something on the BMC, all those, deploy a patch, as well as launch a cluster, launch your applications and functions, and then launch the service. And of course, you can do that in both a brownfield or you can do that in a greenfield environment where you combine that all in a single workflow. We've had customers come to us and say, you've been able to deploy things that used to take us 10 days and now you can do in minutes because we have that multi-domain orchestrator with great observability, because now you can do resource planning and observability that includes your physical resources, as well as your clustering, your network connectivity, et cetera. So that's a big plus. Plus multi-tenancy and roles-based access. So when you start looking at observability in an edge system that can be completely packed with stuff, where they don't have the luxury to physically segregate the stuff, if you want to look at bare metal to services observability, think about all the things you have to tie together. And then you throw multi-tenancy on that as a wrinkle. That means on the back end, you need to be doing a bunch of different scraping and analytics where we can offer that up in a single package so you don't have to do all that. But in a nutshell, those are some of the leading things we do. But again, it's about ease of use that reduces time to outcome. We have numerous integration tools to help you onboard, or we work with you to onboard faster. And you don't have to be the expert. That's the big thing. We take that guesswork out of it for you.
Brooke, thank you so much for taking time out today and talk about, of course, Open RAN, how Robin has kind of evolved over time, and sharing your insights on the 5G deployment. And I look forward to our next conversation. Thank you.
Thank you. My pleasure. Thank you for letting me speak to your audience.